you do this for a living, so I know you're going to be detailed in what you want to talk about and what's important to you. So let's go from the beginning, ladies, if you don't mind me
Yes,
asking them.
absolutely.
Okay.
How
Okay.
did this all come about? Tell us about, growing up where you did and what got you into this life of crime, I guess. I know it's overdone, but what got you into this?
For sure. And so my name's Arturo. I spent over 23 years of incarceration, experienced system-induced trauma, inhumane isolation, torture. I'm a federal, state gang expert. And so what that means is I work with individuals that have the highest of crimes. Work with the public defender's office, private practice, lawyers. And so I say that to say that now, like, I'm a family man, I have a wife, I have kids, 8-year-old, 6-year-old, a 17-year-old that thinks she's 35, and a 24-year-old that finally settled in, right? So, that's my priority first and foremost. But just want to give you some background. And so, I was born in New York, in the Bronx, 1976, during the crack epidemic. Mother from Colombia, just her and I. Didn't work out with pops. A lot of domestic violence within the household, domestic disputes. So he left within the year. And so we went through that challenge of me not having that father figure. We ended up moving to Alaska for a couple years. And then so I remember them thoughts vividly. Alaska, the snow, the glaciers, the snow sledding. It
That
was
was a
a great
drastic change, huh?
Yeah. So it was a great moment because it was peaceful, right? It was my mother and I had a couple family members there as well also. But
What made her
moving
move to
forward,
Alaska?
what's that?
What made her move to Alaska?
She wanted to get away from my dad. Yeah, she just wanted to get away from my dad. So,
It sounds like something you make up. You're like, you know what? I'm going to move to Alaska to get away from you.
Just out the blue. I'm
Wow.
gonna move to Alaska, right? And so,
How old were you then?
While in Alaska, then she had another thought 2 years later, like, I'm moving to San Diego. And then I'm moving to San Diego, and the neighborhood that we decided to move into was City Heights, back then also known as East San Diego. So in that process, I was being raised without a father in the home. I experienced a lot of different complex traumas. I experienced family sexual abuse when I was a kid. I went to Colombia when I was 6 years old. While I was there, I remember seeing my first murder right in front of my mamita's house. I was this kid, fearful, frightened, and I remember everybody would just run, but I'm just there, scared. And my grandmother would grab me, like, smack me across the face, and you better get inside the house because it's a routine there, right? If something happens, everybody's already programmed and knows what they're gonna go do, which is run in the house. So as a kid, I experienced all these different complex traumas. So I had a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of resentment and boredom, and I didn't know how to handle them feelings. And so when I came to San Diego, I went through the school system. During that time, City Heights, there was no police station there. The closest police department was 10 miles away, which is at Warren Road. It was a high infested crime rate activity. We're talking about the late 1980s, early 1990s. During that time, there was a lot of activity with gangbanging, in particular in California. And so being raised in that neighborhood, single mom, I was a latchkey kid. What latchkey means is my mother would latch the key because she had 2 jobs. She had to work in the morning, in the afternoon, cleaning homes, Coronado, different homes. And so she had to bring in the bacon, right? And do everything in her power to keep us alive. And so I needed that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose. So I found that in gangs. And then they became my family members. And we used to validate each other's trauma. Like, okay, well, you don't got a dad, I ain't got a dad, you ain't got a dad, so we're validating our traumas and we got something in common. Or I went through this trauma and this trauma, poverty. So we're validating each other as individuals, and it becomes a family atmosphere.
It's a support group, right? You're actually like for lack of a better word, a street support group.
Yeah, it's a
When
street
did
support
you-
group.
right? And then everything's cathartic. You're kind of like bouncing things off of each other. You probably never were able to share those things anyway.
Yeah, and
Was there a father? Was there a father figure that you guys? It was more like a brotherhood, or was there a father figure that you had in a gang?
The father figure was the older homie. That was the father figure.
Okay.
So if you were the older homie, then you were the father figure, and that's who we looked up to, like the older homeboy, the older generation, the older clique, and so because that's how gangs operate. So it's a form of a unity, family, and we don't have the right resources. You know, we're poor. We're gonna go out in the community and steal. So my first charge was a bike. I took someone's bike from a yard. I was in middle school. I went through the juvenile system. They put me on probation, and
So
that's when I became.
I'd seen a news story done talking about curfew. In that San Diego has a curfew, and you had mentioned that in that story, and also had mentioned that at first you were more of a wannabe, wanted to be in a gang, and it was just you and your buddies hanging out and giggling and whatever, and then it turned into more. But that was your first time. You had mentioned that most of the cops were just jerks and we're just like whatever, but you'd also had mentioned, well, I guess let me just ask, tell me about Pac-Man.
Oh yeah, Pac-Man. Oh, you read the article.
I sure
Let's
did.
go.
Yeah,
Came
all
prepared.
right. You did some research. Okay.
We all did our
This
research.
is what we do.
This is what we do. We all do our research. And
That's good. I love that. And so that was an article on racial disparities through KPBS with
Mhm.
Melissa. And so Pac-Man, when he was a cool cop, trauma-informed cop, like, would come up to us and just have a conversation. Really, that's all it took. Not just come up and put your hands up.
Right.
Put your hands up. There's a difference between put your hands up than, hey, how you doing? How's it going today? So he had that gift. And we were able to build relationships. And honestly, when he would come to us, we would do everything in our power to like respect them, not cross that line, that boundary, break the law. And so he was a well-known Pac-Man police department police officer here in San Diego. And so that's a sign of someone that has compassion and doesn't judge, right? Doesn't come from a place of judgment. And so we were experiencing that during that time, racial disparities. Like if they see the kids out in the community, then boom, you're going in. You're going in. And then when I went in, I didn't go specifically for that. I went in for the bike. But stereotype through racial disparities, that's when I became to get wrapped up in a cycle. Now I'm part of the probation system. Now I'm going to juvenile hall for a week, coming back out, connecting with my mother. Now I have that system. I have to check in to a probation officer, and it just became a cycle. I
Did you
went
feel
in
like
and
that
out.
didn't allow you to really progress because you were in, and then you would be hit with a fine that would set you back financially. You have court dates. Now you got to get a lawyer. Like you miss school. Like it's a snowball effect of just by the end of this, you're like, all right, I'm institutionalized at the end of the day, right?
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect, and it takes some time to get to that being institutionalized, but that's where it starts. And so
did
now,
you notice? Did you notice when you were in I would imagine juvenile hall, it was more of a glorious type of thing. Like people in there were,
Glorified.
was it more glorified?
Glorifying
Was
it.
it more because you hear a lot of different stories that this is where they made their families, their friends, this is how they got into it because they went to juvenile hall. Was it something like that? Was it something like that, or was it completely different?
well, it gets to that, but the initial like feeling is fear.
Like, were you proud to be there at any point? Were you proud, like a badge of honor?
The initial is like the feeling is fear when you go in, because it's a system. Like you don't know what's going on. Like, and then once you get over that fear, and then you see your homies in there and people that you know from the streets, and then being institutionalized, going in and out, then it can become glorified, right? But the things that juveniles or adults don't express or won't share is that component of fear, right? Because it's looked at as weak, like, oh, but you don't share that. So it gets to that part. And so by the age of 18, I had already like went in and out about 5 times, different camps. I went to a YA alternative, Arizona Boys Ranch. There, it was military structured. I learned a lot of discipline, ran marathons, part of a basketball team, physical training, Mega Man, Iron Man. I was there for a year and a half.
So what
And
is
I thought
the ranch one? The what is that one?
the
that
Arizona
were-
Boys, yeah, the Arizona Boys Ranch. So that was a YA alternative. That was your
Youth
last
Au-
stop.
Youth Authority Alternative.
Yeah, Youth Authority Alternative. Back in the day, it was called YA. And so that was the last option for me to go there, or they're going to send me to the Youth Authority, which was YA. So it's like a mini prison for juveniles. And so
At that point, what was your charge? What would you have been in for?
well, what I just went in for that bike, right? And then after that, I was just a runner. When I would go to camps, I would run from them. After 8 months, 9 months, I would AWOL and I was gone. So then I'll be out on the streets for about 3-4 months, get caught, go in. 7-8 months, I would run again. So that was my whole process. But by the time I was 18, after I got out that camp, I thought I had it figured out. Like, I'm working. They wanted to hire me as a forest ranger at Sabino Canyon in Arizona. I was excited. 2 weeks in, I'm getting homesick. I'm telling my mother, I want to come home. Like, this ain't for me. One of the worst mistakes that I make. I come home. When I come home, I do good for about a month. But see, I wasn't connecting with that personal development. All them complex traumas that I expressed earlier, I still had a lot of resentment. And I lived life with a lot of anger in my life. And so out in the community about 3 more months, I'm in the county jail, Old County Jail, in a fish tank, 2 black eyes, no belt, no shoes. I ended up going in for attempted murder. I shot someone named Richard Ramos, and it wasn't even a gang member. And the reason I named his name, Richard Ramos, is because I acknowledge him, right, for doing that. Because now I know better. Now I've worked on myself. But now going into prison during this era, it was all punitive. 3 strikes era. People were getting striked out, life terms. If you had 2 strikes, 1 strike, people were going for 3 strikes and you're out for having a drug charge.
Before we go really quick, before we go further into that, I have a question for you.
Okay.
As seeing your mom, as a single mom, and I know a lot of us have been there as single moms. Is there anything your mom said to you when you first got in trouble and that just kind of hit home where maybe that should have been like, okay, this should have been the point. Like now that you look back, that should have been the clue to maybe I should have done something to, like, is there anything where it just that one, thing that your mom might have looked at you or said or that might have just said, this hit home?
The best thing is her example. Just honestly, her example of being a lady of values, Christian lady. Just she's strong, but she helps people like at all costs. And so as far as nothing being said at that time, nothing was gonna work for me. I'm just gonna be honest, like not her words, not words from anybody, because I was still holding that anger and that resentment. And so that was something that I needed to connect with and deal with. And until I started dealing with that, there was nothing that no one was going to tell me that was going to change my trajectory. But
Did
her
she ever-
example,
Could she have apologized? I'm sorry to cut you off, but could she have
No, you're fine.
apologized to you? And would that have sufficed at that moment, or is there something that she could have said at all to stop this?
No, because like the like it wasn't her fault that the relationship ended. Like as far as the abuse that I mentioned, it wasn't under her household, so it was like nothing of her fault, right? And so I guess what I could have done better is express that to her, like this happened, right? I just didn't know how as a kid. I didn't know how to have that conversation. And so during that time, for me, anger led to violence. That's what
Do you
it
think
was.
that's something
Anger.
we're lacking in the youth community now? Do you think that's something that we're lacking now?
Oh, most definitely. That's why I do this work. I'm able to understand. and I have that shared lived experience. And when I connect with the kids, whether it's in juvenile hall, out in the community, high schools, middle schools, right now there's a lot of challenge with the youth. And my first thing is like, this is what I went through, similar to what like I'm expressing here on this podcast. I express that to them because I'm able to do that now.
And I would think that back then, I mean, late 80s, early 90s, even through the 90s, it wasn't as easy to say those things. I mean, mental health was a stigma. You know what I mean? It was not something that you, if you
Yeah.
felt that way, you were like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything. So I
Those were
feel like now it's a little bit easier to be like, listen, this happened. I have this trauma, and
Yeah.
we're a bit more receptive to it. Would you
yes,
think?
you're
Yeah.
complete. And there was no programs like the
No,
programs
nothing.
that we
It
had.
wasn't
like,
rehabilitation. It was, like you said, 3
Punishment.
strikes you're out. It was
It was
just
based on, you know, it was
punitive.
based on
Yeah.
punishment for sure.
and so like even at the school systems, like the teachers and the system that was in place that, you know, has conflicts and we need some systemic change till this day. But, you know, teachers, because I was quiet, you know, I used to move around a lot, right?
hmm
And, you know, just they would stereotype me. Oh,
Mhm.
this is that kid that's going to get into trouble. And you know what's crazy? In the 6th grade or 5th grade, there's a test. It's called the SMART test.
5th grade. Star
And
test.
a STAR test. So
Oh, the
if you
STAR
take
test.
this test and you fail this test, they're already pre-planning a prison bed for you for the future.
Oh wow.
Oh,
They're
really?
already planning that. Yeah, like
That's crazy,
yeah,
huh?
the CDCR system.
Really?
There's
Yes,
a
they're already-
database.
Yes, because
Mhm.
and I was just listening to this yesterday about data as far as like if you don't get that high school diploma, right? You're more likely, if you're black and brown, to be a part of the system.
Definitely,
You're-
but I definitely didn't think that there was like a system of like a Dewey Decimal System of like people who, you know what I mean, like a
Oh, yes.
library of folks you can access, and then, you know, correlate that to, well, these could be the next criminals,
Yeah,
and
that's-
or that's almost like Minority Report. It's almost like thought crimes,
Wow.
right? Like you're
Yeah.
thinking of a crime,
Mhm.
like that's
Yep.
it's
Wow.
incredible.
Yeah, and it's you know, everything's strategic. You know, from our history to corporate business, individuals put a plan together. How we gonna operate, the goals, the objectives, right? And so that's what was being done with that STAR test.
Yeah.
And so I was that kid that
Texas
failed
is
that
trying to
test,
get rid of the STAR test.
Yeah.
right?
One of our,
And so
Thing.
yeah,
one of our
so
live
then-
listeners says Texas is trying to get rid of the STAR test.
Mm-hmm.
oh, what's that?
One of our live listeners, the people who are watching live right now,
Yeah.
she's saying that Texas is trying to get rid of the STAR